Okay. Yeah, so today we have our presenter is Nancy Van Meter. Nancy is a full-time artist and art teacher, and she is a member of the Miniature Painters, Sculptors, and Gravers Society of Washington, D.C. And she is also a graduate of the Schuler School of Fine Art in Baltimore, Maryland, which is where she is broadcasting from live. So, Nancy, I will turn it over to you now and tell us everything you need about miniature painting.
Thank you, Molly. I'm thrilled to be here and sharing my love and knowledge of miniature artworks. I've been involved with the miniature world for about 10 years through the Schuler School here in Baltimore. Before that, I knew very little except for what I learned at the Corcoran and other museums I used to work in Washington, D.C. And by way of history, the miniature artworks go back to the ancient times, but we're not going to go back that far. Today, I'm just going to tell you that the largest collection of miniature artworks in America is in Charleston, South Carolina, at the Gibbs Museum. And they have many of the most famous American artists there in their collection. You can also see them at the National Gallery of Art, who inherited the Corcoran's entire collection, which included Peale, Copley, Holbein. Most people know the name Fabergé. He is considered a miniaturist, even though he's a jeweler. Many of his pieces have little sculpture particles in them. And that said, the golden age of miniature was around 1750 to 1850. And it was the age before photography. And people needed something to keep close to their hearts of their loved ones. So the miniature portraits were a way for them as they traveled, as they went to war, as they forgot and lost someone. They would have a miniature portrait commissioned and keep it in their vest pocket. And in many war movies today, if you watch any, Gettysburg, what was the one we were watching most recently? The Patriot. They will show, and The Last of the Mohicans, they will show a little scene, and if you're really quick, you can catch it, of one of the officers or one of the soldiers pulling out of his pocket a portrait of a loved one. So I think one of the things that attracts me about miniatures is how much they're connected to love. And it's a direct connection. So the idea of this is all about love attracts me very much. There was a pause in the creation and the collection of miniatures after the invention of photography, because naturally people became very enamored with photography, and it was like magic. And in the early 1900s, a group of women artists in America got together and they revived the whole tradition of miniature art, not only with portraits, but this time with landscape, still life, sculpture, you name it, they did it, and they're still doing it. And we're doing a lot of it at the Schuler School of Fine Arts. So we're hoping that this trend continues. It seems to grow bigger every year. And the Miniature Painter, Sculpture, Graver Society is a big part of that movement. It happens to be the second largest miniature society on earth, and it's second only to the Royal Miniature Society in London. Both societies were founded by the same person, Alan Williams, and the DC Society was founded in 1931 at the Corcoran Museum. So we really are connected to DC in a big way. And that said, I'm going to go right in, get a little glass of water. I'm going to show you what I call a family tree. It comes from the Schuler School of Fine Arts, where we're broadcasting from, as Molly said. This is a working studio. It's a historic sculpture studio, and it was built in 1906. It's been in use practically every day since then. Francesca, the director of the school, is working the camera. Fritz Briggs, our master teacher, is sitting here in the studio watching us. And my boyfriend, Frank Callista, is holding up my notes, which you can put down now, Frank. I just wanted to make sure I covered a little bit of the general history before going into the family tree. So I'm holding maul stick. This is part of our training here at Schuler. We learn how to steady our hands by using a maul stick to work very, very finely. And I can't really conceive of creating a miniature artwork without this maul stick. It also doubles as a pointer. So I'm going to use it as a pointer right now, but you should know it has a very important purpose in this lecture. So starting on the family tree, on the top row are these three portraits by Anne Dietrich Schuler, who co-founded the school with her husband, Hans Schuler. They happen to be Francesca's parents. And the little girl you see here in the middle is Francesca. Very adorable, very little. Oops. We need a little bit of technical difficulty. The actual painting is maybe 3 inches high by 2.5 inches wide. Francesca's entire body is in this painting. Her chubby little legs, her Mary Jane shoes, her adorable face, her blonde curly hair. It's clearly an expression of love. And here we go back to the tradition in miniatures of this is something Anne cherished her daughter, her only daughter, and portrayed her for all of us to cherish because you can't help look at this image and fall in love with it. On the left here, guess who it is again? It's Francesca. How old were you here, Francesca? Two maybe, but her adorable braids. And again, her blonde curly hair, her rosy cheeks. This is an expression of intense love. And going into the real tradition, this is of a size that a person could conceivably put in a vest pocket or beautifully hang on a wall. This is a vintage frame. You often see miniatures in a circle or an oval in the most traditional sense. That is one of the hallmarks. This whole thing is 2.5 inches square. The image itself is 2 inches round. So you can see there's a whole lot of information and love in this image. And there's no mistake that Anne loved Francesca. And we all do. When we look at this, we can't help but fall in love with it. Anne also portrayed one of our models here in the school. We remember her name, but her beauty is here for us to enjoy. In the old tradition of miniatures in the 1700s and before photography, it was a custom, and it seems funny today, but you have to remember there was no photography, no text messaging, no digital anything. People would often have just the body part painted of their loved ones. So it could be just an eye, or very commonly a pair of breasts or another body part, which would not necessarily identify the sitter, but would mean something really strong to the person who owned it. So we see a little bit of this on Anne's portrayal of her model. Following Anne, because she was the teacher of all of the people on this board, the family tree, was Anne's granddaughter, now granddaughter-in-law, Beth Delaselle, who was my teacher. And Beth is represented by this amazing little bird, this terrier, and these pieces of jewelry, which is a bumblebee and a butterfly. And they are, let's see, 1.5 inches on the jewelry. The little bird, which happens to be part of my own personal collection, is 2.5 inches high by 2 inches wide. So it is similar in size, image-wise, to Francesca's little girl in Mary Jane's picture. And you can see years later how in contemporary miniature world, we're getting a little bit brighter and more emphatic in our backgrounds. Beth is an incredibly accomplished miniature artist. She has done a double portrait of two dogs the size of a dime. And I'm hoping I can follow up with Molly after the talk and provide some websites so that people can get further into this and see some of the amazing work that's being done. Beth has a thriving practice as a miniature painter, and she gets tons of commissions to paint people's dogs and loved ones. But that said, she can paint anything, and she was taught by Anne. Anne also taught Carol Lee Thompson, who continues to teach others. Carol now teaches at the Zoll Studio, but Carol very much followed the traditional path of Anne's teaching in that she continued to focus on portraits of what she calls character studies. So we're getting a little bit away from the idea of the intense relationship of a loved one, but we're falling in love with these characters we don't even know. So again, it's all coming back to love. And Carol's expressions in her characters, we fall in love with the light that she shows us. So as time goes on, miniatures, as I said, the subject matter keeps evolving. So in today's world, it includes all of the subject matters that other art includes, being still life, landscape, sculpture, crazy world, constructions, you name it, there's a miniature aspect to it. The following down the family tree, we're going to have work by Francesca's sons and Beth's husband. This farm scene was done by Beth's husband, Hans, who is a teacher here and co-director of the school. And Hans and Beth live in Hempstead, outside of Baltimore City. It's very rural where they live, and Hans did this from life. So miniature has a plein air aspect to it also. It's a very daring way to approach your miniature because there's a lot of detail that usually ends up happening. And Hans is a brilliant artist who manages to do that very, very well. Hans also loves portraiture, and this little monkey down here is one of his portraits. And we're again going to come back to the idea of love, because the expression on that monkey is attracting us from across the room. We're falling in love with this cute little face. We want him in our lives. I want him in my backyard, in my living room. I'm falling in love with him. And he is 4 inches square, I think. Yes, his image size is 4 inches square. Hans probably spent 80 hours on that drawing. And that drawing is part of a technique that's only taught here at the Schuler School. It came from Anne Schuler's father, who was a medical illustrator at Johns Hopkins. And this is what they call scratchboard. It's not like what you buy in the art supply stores, though. It's done on an additive process with handmade gesso boards that Hans makes for everyone. And you develop your drawing and then you scratch back to the white surface. Most scratch boards you would buy today, you can't get them in the miniature size as far as I know, but they work in a different way. You buy them black and you scratch back to white. But this is a very intense technique. It's very conducive to realism, and it reproduces well. Hans and Beth and everybody on here has shown at the Miniature Painters, Sculpture, and Engraver Society and been members for quite some time. So now we're going into the realm of still life. We have something more whimsical here, which are donuts. Donuts are something everyone loves. So again, we're coming back to the idea of love, falling in love with a snack. I can't go there, I can't buy these, but I can have this on my wall and I can appreciate them, I can love them. Andy Guerin, Francesca's other son, she has two. Andy Guerin is a master of still life portraiture, and once in a while he will favor us by doing a miniature, and this is one of my favorites, just because, you know, I can't have the real thing, but I can have a painting. Andy also did this somewhat whimsical portrayal of an iris, and again, this is a still life subject matter coming into being in the evolution of all of the styles and the modern trends. It's still a very representational object and one of love. This iris, I believe, came from the garden here, and Francesca's mother, Anne, probably planted this one. There are a few very special irises in the garden here, which students are allowed to paint when they bloom. Underneath here, we have a landscape by teacher David Buckley Good, directly studied by under Anne. David is primarily a landscape painter now. He does plein air and he does studio paintings, and somewhat recently shifted to this small format because in the past couple of years, people have been requesting smaller and smaller works. They can be more affordable, not necessarily, but they can be. But people are running out of space. And we hear it all the time that if you've been collecting art for 40 some years, you're going to have a hard time fitting a big work of art into your life. But everybody has a space for a little work of art. And this is another one of the beauties of miniatures, why we fall in love with them, because we don't have to think twice about buying them. We can always find the space, even if you live in a trailer or an RV, there's a space. I have a dog friend who lives in Holiday Inn, and she finds a space for a miniature by displaying it on a miniature easel. And she takes it with her as she travels around to the Holiday Inns around the country with her dogs, and does what she will. She works for the company. But she has found a way to include a collection in her life. Way down here at the bottom is me. I studied with Anne for only a year because I came here when she was in her last year of life, but she was still teaching every day. And I think she painted almost every day till the day she died. And it was a great inspiration to all of us. And for that year, we had to bring Anne all of our work. If she was not well enough to come into the studio, we brought the work up to her bedroom and she would criticize us from her bed. And her criticisms were never glamorous or, what do I want to say, flattering. Anne was always very honest. And I think that's why her training has benefited so many artists, because we don't need to be flattered. We need the truth, and that's the way we improve. But Anne, this is only a small sampling of all the miniatures she painted, and as well, but I did want to show the family tree and show how it's still connected to love, and we're very, very committed to miniature art here. And now I'm going to walk over and show you all how I display miniature artwork in my own home. And my home is my studio, and it's very small. I have a very small Baltimore row house. So I have found a way to keep the clutter under control somewhat. We're going to shift over and I'm going to show you, Frank. So this is kind of where the fun begins. You know, you might have one little painting in a powder room or in a kitchen, and all of a sudden you turn around, it's like rabbits, you've got 20. what are you going to do with them? And, you know, a lot of people live in small spaces these days, or they've run out of room because they have collected so much art or they have so many other things. So this was a way suggested by Styles Colwell, who is a Baltimore interior designer and who showed work for me and Beth at some point. And this is what he suggested for his clients, that he came up with the way to just find a picture frame. And I asked my boyfriend, Frank Callista, if he could manufacture something like Styles was talking about, so I could put my little collected works in one place in my house and not have them scattered all over the place as I'm working on them, finishing them. So Frank is going to show you what he made and how we display. Frank?
Okay, so very simply, you can take any size frame. Of course, a large one like this works out well because you can put in a lot of pieces, and just arrange the small pieces as you need to. And on this frame, we have a Homosote panel covered in a green velvet. You can choose any color and just very simply add a push pin where you want to hang something up. And set it into the frame. Now you can arrange these just like you would on a wall, but this way you can consolidate it all into a nice size frame, and it doesn't works.
Or more. This comes in very handy, and I can't stress enough how much fun it is to start a collection and know that you're not going to run out of space. And even if you have a small interior, you can put all kinds of fun things on this board. And did you use a staple gun to cover it?
Well, it's a Homosote panel. You can take any kind of fabric you want and just cover that panel, use a staple gun and attach it to the back, and just set it into a frame just like you would a picture. And of course, you hang this frame on the wall, and then you can arrange your miniatures.
And I'm kind of going back to a family tree now, because these little watercolors were done by our student here, a fourth-year student, Laura Trent Stein, who received a scholarship from the Miniature Painter Sculpture Graver Society last year. One of the things that the society does that's very amazing, every year they give 2 scholarships out, one to a secondary high school student and one to a college level art student. Last year, Laura won that scholarship and she put it to good use. She's a very hardworking, dedicated student, and she does, as you can see, miniature watercolors. And Laura will often, during class, take the image we've used during a watercolor class, and again, Fritz Briggs is sitting here in the studio, he can vouch, and off to the side, she will take a little pad of paper. These are sold in art supply stores. They're paper samples, but Laura has many little pads, and she will just take her pad, and whatever we've done that day in a big watercolor study, she will do off to the side in a little watercolor side. So she's very committed to this process. And again, we're coming back to love. She's sort of fallen in love with miniature world. And who would not fall in love with this little caboose? It's very charming. So we're going to move along. I talked about a little how in miniature world, sculpture is included, constructions are included, and you may have miniatures around your house that you don't even know about. You probably haven't, you could call them knickknacks, but they may not be knickknacks, they may be miniature works of art. This little bronze frog happens to belong to my boyfriend, Frank, who was just up here explaining how to assemble your collection. And this little frog is maybe an inch big, but he's very, very heavy. He could probably break a window if you threw him at something. And, you know, I think Frank found this in an antique store in Frederick, Maryland, maybe. We were just out for the day. Frank fell in love with this little green frog. And again, we come back to the idea of love. I love this, I have to have it. And he does love it, and I don't want to lose it. So he'll fall out of love with me. The same goes for this little rabbit, which was also found in an antique store. And this could break a few windows if you throw it at something. It's so heavy, it must weigh 3 pounds. It's bronze, and it was very reasonably priced, but it does qualify as a miniature work of art. And before I say any more, I will say that in the traditional sense, in the rules of miniature artwork world, it used to be that in order to be considered a miniature at all, instead of a small painting, you had to have a 1/6 actual size. So whatever your actual size was, your work had to be 1/6 of that size to be considered a miniature. As people evolved in their showing and collecting, the 1/6 rule became a little bit confusing, because if you have a skyscraper and you paint it at 1/6, that's a pretty big painting. It's probably not going to fit in your house. So when you do show at the miniature shows now, many have relaxed that rule and say in the spirit of miniature. And they will often impose a size restriction. The biggest one could be 4x6 or 5x7 or 4x5. Each show is different. And they will get, this is to show how popular miniature shows and art collecting become. They'll get anywhere from 400 to 1,000 plus entries. And they will find a way to show almost all of them. And they will sell more than 60%. So that's pretty something, and saying something in today's world. So this is a very special, I'm going back to sculpture and constructions. This is a very special construction. It certainly qualifies in the 1/6 rule. It is a depiction of the entire studio that we are broadcasting from. This was created by Nana Gail Lauer, who's a student here. And Nana found these little figures in a train store. And there is a painter, there's a sculptor, there is a nude model, and there are tables and chairs. And the image around the studio was a color photograph that Nana kept reducing until it fit into this little format. This is about 3 inches across. And here is our beautiful moored skylight. We are being bathed in that light right now. So Nana labeled it Schuler School of Fine Art. It was in a case here, just begging for me to show you all tonight. It's really incredible. And Nana was so modest in her explanation of it. She was here yesterday telling me about it. And she said, well, I just went to the train store. I said, but Nana, you have to know to go to the train store. You have to know which train store to go to. There's a whole lot of things you have to know. So I could never have produced something like this, and it's amazing. There's a little construction that Nana also did. Francesca better close her eyes because Francesca doesn't like mice. It's a little mouse painting, and the little mouse is painting a portrait of a cat. And inside is a little tube of paint on the ground. Here's the little mouse with her palette, her brush, her jacket. And up here is something else, a sculpture of a little mouse. I'm going to put it away because Francesca gets crazy with mice image.
That's a real pain.
So I just wanted you to see how diverse the subject matter and media can be. So I'm going to produce something of my own work right now. Excuse me. Going to explain that miniature can also be a drawing. It can be a daily practice. One of the students gave me this little tiny book. It's about the size of an index card. It was a Secret Santa present a couple of years ago, and I was so intimidated by it. What am I going to do with this? There's 100+ pages, and she gave me pencils and this little book and said, fill it up. So I put my name and address in it. It sat for about a year. And since then, I have tried to do every day a little drawing that represents a different dog in my image collection. So again, I could probably tear out any of these pages and mat them and frame them and enter it into a show, but I kind of like the idea of the book being a collection in itself. So again, this is another way of this long-haired dachshund. His name is Louis. Again, this is another way to amass a collection of miniature art. You can find a sketchbook like this one and have the whole collection in one little space in your house. And it's just there. And if a thief broke in and wanted to steal your art collection, they probably would not look at this. But it is something I think one day somebody will come along and say, I have to have that whole book. And until then, I have to have this whole book because I love it. And again, we're coming back to the love. You have to really love this process to be able to continue it and see the love in each of these little dogs.
It's a little glare on it.
Oh, sorry. Is this any better? A little better. Okay. So we won't dwell on this a whole lot longer, but I just wanted to show you a different way you could assemble a collection by buying a sketchbook or creating one yourself. So getting into the process of how do you actually produce these? I know we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to show you all that it's not just sit down and paint. At least for me, I have to take a long time to figure out the design and the composition and what I'm going to change about my image. I almost always work from photographs and miniatures because unlike Hans, I can't go out and know what to do immediately. I have to spend a long time with an image to figure out what to do with it. But when we do go out plein air painting, again, Fritz Briggs sitting here in the studio takes us out plein air painting during the summer. What I do, I try to do little sketches, and even though these are miniature sketches, these are the brushes that I use. I start out with this size. It's a number 12 filbert, and it's about 3/4 of an inch wide. And most people are just shocked by the audacity of taking a big brush like this and starting a little bitty painting that's 4 inches or 3 inches. But the idea is that in this kind of a process, you are sparing detail. You don't want detail. Miniatures depend on good design. They depend on good composition. They want to be read from across the room. Even though they're little, they have to be mighty. And mighty, believe it or not, is not in the details, it's in the design. And if your design is faulty, the details won't matter. So working with a huge brush spares the detail. You just can't get it. To get any kind of the detail, you have to use one of these little brushes. You see, I have quite a collection, but this comes at the end. This is not the beginning, this is the end. The same thing would apply to a watercolor. This was started from a photograph with a 1-inch watercolor brush, a big flat one. And the whole thing was finished with a 1-inch watercolor brush. Again, there's no detail, but there's a suggestion of the light and the atmosphere. And if it's not reading from across the room, then I have failed in my mission. So this is a very good way to check yourself to see, is it going to work from the beginning or not? If it's not going to work in the beginning, there's no sense in spending 18 hours finishing it or more. Again, these are little plein air sketches done with this big number 12 brush. They're oil on paper, canvas paper. And let's see. Over here, I'm going to try to apply some paint. I have 5 minutes. So I'm going to take one of my great big brushes here, and I'd like to show you my process here. I said it was involved, and I wasn't kidding. Just this weekend, I prepared this especially for this talk, is how I would start conceiving something. How do I even know that it's going to work? I started this with a big black and white photograph. This is the river near Oella in Ellicott City. We recently participated in a plein air event, not a miniature event, but got to take a lot of photos in the rain. This was the river in the rain. So working from black and white, I can make any kind of color harmony I want to. I'm not wedded to what was there. And this is going to be an interpretive landscape. You have to always change things in the landscape. So what I'm trying to do here is just establish the design. And all of these little steps, these postage stamp steps, are telling me if it's going to be an effective design or not. And when I do this, I think of the artist Mondrian. He's a very modern artist, very contemporary, not a realist, but his technique was similar to what I'm doing here. He made square angles of everything. He angled everything and eliminated everything except for the angle. And here we're just trying to eliminate dark and light and establish, which one of these little things, even though they're very similar, it's going to read best from across the room. So I'm just here trying to figure out what the heck is going to happen to my landscape. I'm getting a little more detailed in this one, but again, you can see it's no curves, it's no slants, it's no trees, it's just angled lines, dark and light. And finally, I get to my little panel and my Indian yellow paint, which is a very transparent, warm paint, unlike a black and white cold photo. But I thought, even if this is going to be a rainy day scene, a foggy scene, I wanted to have a warm undertone. So that's where the yellow came in. This is my palette. Normally I have 4 times the amount of paint on here, but I knew we weren't going to have a lot of time to paint today. But I'm going to show you just a little bit of how I go back into this and establish some kind of a color hierarchy. And normally we would start with the sky, and we have a special sky color here that is very pleasing. And look at the size of this brush. Am I doing glimmers on the water? No. Am I doing anything that looks like it could be a leaf or a twig or a boot floating down the river? No. I'm just trying to establish some kind of a hierarchy of color here and get something on my panel and see if the yellow is going to glow through or not. This could change many, many times. And it probably will. But I like to get nice big paint on as soon as I have the underpainting accounted for. And again, look at the size of this brush. It's really helping me do whatever I can in 5 minutes. If this were Hans, he could probably have painted this scene in 5 minutes. But it wouldn't be the final thing. It would just be the block in of what he saw, the darks and the lights. Take my other big brush. Look at the size of this brush compared to the panel. And I'm just going to go in with a dark, dark, dark. we always say in landscape painting, and it applies to miniatures, when in doubt, paint it purple. And Hans told me just before he left tonight, he said, I wish you could do this talk, Hans. You might be so much better than me. He said, just get some darks in there and put your sky in. So that's what I'm doing. If I am transparent enough, some of my underpainting can show through and actually look pretty finished. But this big brush is my best friend, and most people just can't believe it, you know, when they see these huge brushes and they think I'm crazy. Oh, yeah. But you can see how it's already developing without a huge amount of struggle in our little 5-minute increments. It's pretty okay. This little one here was something I worked on Sunday. It was actually the second sitting of the painting. So I had an underpainting and I had big brushes applied. It's Prophecy Creek from up in Pennsylvania. It's a kind of a spooky looking place. And I don't know why they call it Prophecy Creek. It, it intrigues me that it's called that. But my next sitting, I will go in with a brush that is not one of those in the silver loving cup, but this one is about 1/4 inch. And I can get some more intense color applied and thicker paint now that the underpainting is covered. So this is about what I can do in 5 minutes. This will have many more sittings. And hopefully, if these come out, they will both be included in the Miniature Painter Society's annual show at the Strathmore Mansion, which opens November 21st, I believe. They usually have about 700 paintings at least, and drawings and sculpture, all media. It's a fantastic venue. It's right before the holidays. The mansion is beautiful. The show is gorgeous. They print the catalog. And it's a wonderful experience to just go and see the diverse styles and the diverse subject matters that people all over the world, because this is an international show at the Strathmore Mansion, people come from all over the world submitting their artworks. And it's really kind of a don't miss thing. And it's not well publicized in the DC area, I don't think. So this is a good chance for all of you viewers tonight to get a firsthand inkling as to what's down the road. I think everybody would love to see it. And you will see finished works of art instead of works in progress. So I hope I've covered enough. And I guess Molly is going to open the
I
discussion.
am. Yeah. Yeah, you are right on time, Nancy. Thank you for showing us your very tiny paintings done with very large brushes. We do have some questions already, but if anybody else has any more questions, please type them in chat, and I will be reading them aloud to Nancy over the next few minutes, and we will see if we can get some answers. Here's the first one. Catherine asked, what kind of bristle is the number 12 brush?
Oh, good question. It is a silver, the name of the brush company is called Silver, and it's called a Bristleton 1903 filbert. And it is a combination of hog's hair and synthetic. This is my favorite brush on the planet, this Silver Bristleton filbert 1903. It can really lay down the paint thick, or it can lay it down thin. And it's very versatile. It cleans up beautifully. As you can see, this is a well-used brush, and look how white it is. This other brush is yellowed with solvents and paint, and maybe mine not cleaning it up enough, but this is what they usually do after a while. This one is the same age, and it hasn't done that.
Wow.
So yeah, it's part synthetic and part probably hog's hair. Any more? I'm going to be cleaning my brushes, by the way, with a special, as you paint smaller, you start buying smaller things.
Mhm.
And this is lavender brush cleaner that is made by a company. It's a relatively new company in America, and they're producing natural solvents and cleaners that are very, very, they say safer, all natural. They smell like heaven if you like the smell of lavender. You can buy these little bitty sample kits, and you don't have to worry too much about, I'm going to use this in one day. When you paint miniatures, this may
Yeah.
last a couple of weeks. And I hope I don't knock anybody over with the smell of lavender in here, but we all pretty much liked it.
Let's see, we have another question from Mary. I'm curious if there is a history of painting miniatures on anything besides canvases.
Oh, yes, yes. Panels, ivory, we don't want to talk about that, but many of the old ones were painted on ivory. And some of the old ones are watercolor on ivory. I don't know how they made the watercolor stick on ivory. In today's world, we have an ivory substitute, and it is sold by one of the members of the Miniature Painter Sculpture Engraver Society. It's called Ivorine.
Okay.
And synthetic ivory that is made in England, it smells like camphor, but it's translucent, and you can draw on it, paint on it, do collage on it. If you've got a nice sketch that you really liked, you can trace your sketch if you're good at tracing. I'm not good at tracing, believe it or not. I mess up a lot if I try to trace something. I'm much better off trying to do it from reality again, even if I have to go back to the square one. But this Ivorine is available from Nancy Still at miniartsupply.biz. And I can send Molly links to these websites if you're interested, Molly.
Oh, yes, please do. Yes.
I will. But this Ivorine has replaced ivory. And they say if you have something that's real ivory, you can't sell it. I don't know what you do with it. I guess you can give it away, but you can't sell it.
Piano keys.
You can-
Piano keys are ivory. So
Piano keys are ivory. Nancy Still also sells piano keys that people paint on. And in the Miniature Society show at Strathmore, you will often see little tiny paintings painted on piano keys. But that is the answer. There's
Okay.
also a surface called Polymid, which is thinner than Ivorine. I have never painted on it, but people do paint on it and they like it. It's very translucent and almost transparent. So if a person wants to trace something, I'm not a tracer, but if they did want to trace something, Polymid would be your first choice.
Okay.
And let me show you one other thing. Like Laura Stein has a collection of these little sample paper books. There's a substrate called Yupo. I've never painted on Yupo, but it is almost like Ivorine.
Okay.
It's stiff and it's kind of plasticky feeling.
Hmm.
It's more opaque than Ivorine, at least in this heavy weight. But you could take a piece of paper. This is Stonehenge Craft, which is beautiful brown. You can prepare it with acrylic matte medium, a couple of coats, not just one. You need about 3 coats, and you can paint on that, and it's absolutely archival. You want to look for acid-free, 100% cotton if you can get it. The Legion Paper Company is very good about 100% cotton archival, except that they do produce this Yupo, which I don't even know what Yupo is. They don't really, it's what?
Russian.
It's Russian, okay. And they have this, they call this translucent, but again, it's very flimsy. So I guess you would have to use a light source under this in order to trace anything. I don't have much faith that the paint would actually stick to this. You may have to sand it before you paint on it.
Okay.
But any of these little papers, and Stonehenge, these little paper samples, I think they're $2 a piece. And they're really wonderful if you just want to try a miniature. This is a small investment. And most people have a pencil hanging around.
Yeah.
And any of these drawing surfaces, they'd be wonderful to draw on. So this is going to be particularly fascinating, I think, to any watercolorists in the audience. Black watercolor paper. And Fritz is sitting in the corner kind of glaring at me right now. But I think this might be fun to try. I would see it more as a gouache or acrylic media to put on this black paper, but you can buy it in much bigger sizes than this. But before you do that, you should try a little, and this would make an exquisite little miniature. These samples just also happen to be the right size if you want to go to Michael's craft store and buy a miniature with a mat. They're about $5, and these are perfectly sized to fit in those frames. But this is very good paper, and it's not a huge investment. But again, if you want to do oil painting on it, you have to compare it with matte medium or acrylic paint, 3 layers. You're good to go. Otherwise, I guess you can use watercolor on them without preparing them, or acrylic without preparing them, or pencil or ink. Charcoal, I don't know. I think any of those papers would be a little bit too slick to use charcoal. I don't think it would stick. So, and pastel, I don't think it would stick. So I'm not going to advise that.
We have 2 more questions.
Okay.
Is a magnifying glass ever used for painting fine detail?
It can be.
Okay.
Francesca's daughter-in-law, Beth Gelisel, like I said, she painted a double portrait the size of a dime of 2 Pomeranian dogs. And for that double portrait, she invested in a headpiece magnifier, but she hardly ever uses a magnifier. And Beth, I think Beth might be from outer space. I don't know how she does what she does, but she will use it upon occasion. And it has to be really tiny, and Beth's eyesight, I guess, Beth is only about 35, if she's that. And I don't wear reading glasses. I'm up there. And I haven't got reading glasses yet, and I don't use a magnifying glass. Of course, my work is kind of loose. I do have a magnifying glass, a separate thing that I could hold, and I often use it when I'm signing my name to these miniatures because it's such a tiny space. I find I do better without it though, and unless the light is, I need really good light, and I don't know if that answers your question or not.
I think so.
Oh, yes. Fritz just reminded me that at Strathmore Mansion during the exhibit, they will provide people with magnifying glasses so that you can walk around and look at the work under the magnifying glass. And you've seen some incredible things. And there's kind of a fascinating aside from the history of miniature art, the famous Book of Kells in the Trinity Library in Dublin, Ireland. The monks in the Kells Monastery, I think it was the 800s. If you look at their illuminated manuscripts under a microscope, you will see microscopic images under the images you can see with your naked eye.
Wow.
So that's pretty mind-blowing. I don't know that they had magnifying glasses, but they may have. I understand they had a lot of psilocybin mushrooms growing around the monastery. And that was one of the theories about how these illuminated letters got to be so fantastic and how they could do such tiny, tiny things that today only with the microscope we can see that layer. So I hope that answers the question. I would use it if you needed it. And that's the basic reply.
Catherine wants to know, what is your favorite oil paint?
My favorite oil paint,
Yes.
brand-wise,
That was the whole question. I know you mix your own paints there at the school as well.
My favorite is the stuff we make ourselves here at the school. We prepare black oil that we boil for a long time to oxidize it. And we mix the black oil with the powdered pigment, pure pigment. And for a miniature painting, really, you can't get any better than that. And there's a brightness and I don't know, an intensity to it that is impossible to achieve with most tubed paints today. The consistency can be adjusted. If you like thick paint, you put less oil. If you want thin paint, you put more oil. And we also make a special medium that we use. But when I use tube paints, I like Gamblins and I like Old Holland. And I have this blue, which our teacher, David Good, we should call this David Buckley Good Blue, but it's called King's Blue Light, and its particular brand is Old Holland. David's very fussy about the brand. This is a color that other manufacturers have, but Old Holland's is the best. So I like Old Holland paints and I like Gamblin. Gamblin is affordable and they give you a lot of information on the tubes. So you know what pigment you're getting, and they will, they're very consistent across the board. So if you buy cadmium yellow light this week and you go back 2 years later and buy some more, you're gonna have the same paint. If everything applies. But Gamblin's good, definitely, and they're pretty affordable. Old Holland can be expensive, but they're the best, I think. If you can't make it yourself, make it Old Holland.
Okay. The words to live by. There. All right. Well, we are coming along to the end. So I would like to thank you again, Nancy, for doing this amazing talk and showing us your artwork. You mentioned that there is a show coming up later this year at the Miniature Painters and Engravers Society in DC. I will be, everybody that signed up for this talk will also get an email later with all the links. So there'll be links to the Schiller School and Nancy's website and to the Miniature Painters and Engravers Society. But do you have any other personal shows coming up or anything like that you'd like us to know about before we sign off?
Well, if you want to see some really examples of exquisite portraits, you could look at Dog and Horse Fine Art Gallery in Charleston, South Carolina, where Francesca's granddaughter, I keep calling her granddaughter because Beth looks 12 to me, but it's Francesca's daughter-in-law, Beth De La Salle, has partnered with the gallery and some jewelry makers to make some incredibly amazing oil paintings that are set into jewelry. And Beth, a few years ago, did one for me. Can you zoom in on this, Francesca? This is one of my treasured objects, and I almost forgot to mention it.
Is it a Scotty?
It's a Scotty. It's my Lucy, and it's about 3/4 of an inch by 1/2 inch. But it's bow, and I wear it close to my heart. Again, we're going back to that idea that these are about love. And Beth's work is amazing. So Dog and Horse is her main venue, I guess, right now, other than the school here. And usually the school gets first dibs on all her new work. And I show my work there as well. So I'm showing miniatures and larger works there at the moment. And I show my work here at the school, and just about any miniature show that I see that I think, I have enough work for. These take a long time to finish.
Yeah. We definitely have gotten an idea of how long it takes to do.
This is just the process, but hopefully these will be done by the end of August, and I can enter them in the Strathmore show. But they kind of tend to fly off the walls, and I would encourage anybody who's interested in starting an art collection to start small, because you'll fit it into your life even if you live in a Holiday Inn and travel with your dogs all over the country. You can still have an art collection.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you again. And thank you all so much. Again, I will be sending everybody an email after this that will have links to all the places mentioned. And the talk for this will eventually be put up on the DC Public Library YouTube channel. I will send out a link for that again. It will probably be about 3 weeks before that's done, because we will need to do all the subtitles for that. But thank you so much, Nancy, for showing us your studio, and thank you everybody for coming to this program. This is one of the largest audiences we have ever had for a Maker Talk. So thank you all so much. And hopefully we will see you at our next talk next month.
Okay, Molly.
All right, I'm going to end the Zoom now, and everybody have a great night.
You too.